For over 5 decades, Diana Ross held a truth so tightly, not even her closest confidants dared to probe too deeply. And Michael Jackson, he carried that same truth like a scar, silent, sacred, and burning beneath the surface. It was the greatest secret of his life. A secret not born from scandal, but from something far more complicated. This isn't a love story, not the kind you'd expect. This is about the unnamed, undefined connection between two icons, bonded by something deeper than fame, closer than friendship, and far more dangerous than romance. She once called him her child. He once described her as his mother, sister, and something else, something he refused to name. For decades, they danced around that unspoken space. A glance here, a silence there, a line in a song, a clause in a will. Nothing confirmed, yet everything revealed. They once shared an apartment. He skipped her wedding, and in his last will, he named her second only to his own mother. What does that say? What did it mean? And now, at 81, Diana Ross is speaking for the first time. No interview fanfare, no magazine exclusive. Just a soft, almost trembling voice, choosing to finally unburden what she's held for half a century. You may think you know Michael Jackson. You may think you understand Diana Ross, but there's a story behind the curtain that's never been told in full until now. This story isn't shaped by paparazzi headlines. It's shaped by decades of silence, by songs written with tears, by glances that lingered just too long, and by words never spoken until it was far too late. Was it love? Was it devotion? Or was it something even more sacred, too fragile to expose to the world? Whatever it was, it followed Michael from childhood to stardom, from the Motown stage to the private halls of Neverland. And now, with time no longer an enemy, the truth has finally started to unravel. So stay with us, because by the time you reach the end of this journey, you'll realize Michael never hid the truth. He simply left it where only the bravest would look. The first time Michael Jackson met Diana Ross, he was just 9 years old, a quiet, fragile boy with trembling hands and wide, wondering eyes. It was a Motown gathering, packed with power players, producers, and polished stars. But among all that glitz, Michael was nearly invisible. Just another child in the Jackson 5, standing close to his brothers, trying to breathe through the pressure. And then, she appeared. Diana Ross didn't just walk into the room, she shifted its gravity. Graceful, commanding. She wasn't just the star of Motown, she was its soul. When her eyes met Michael's, something changed. She walked over, bent down, and in a soft voice, said, "Hi, sweetheart." That simple greeting would echo for the rest of his life. To the world, Diana Ross was an icon, the embodiment of elegance and power. But to Michael, she became something more. Sanctuary. In her, he didn't see a celebrity. He saw warmth, acceptance, a reason to feel safe. He once said she was mother, sister, and the rest I leave unsaid. Because there was no category for what he felt. It wasn't crush, and it wasn't purely admiration. It was something complex, something sacred. A feeling that lived between the lines, in the pauses, in the way his eyes always found hers in a room full of people. As the years passed, that memory only grew stronger. Michael often said Diana was the first person who made him believe he was more than just a performer. While others treated him like a product, she saw the person, the scared little boy behind the perfect pitch. She didn't just teach him how to sing on cue. She taught him how to hold the stage, how to smile when his heart was pounding, how to walk into a room like he belonged there, and most of all, how to shine, not because he had to, but because he could. She gave him what no one else could, the courage to be himself. And from that first moment, that first gaze, something was planted inside Michael Jackson, something tender, eternal, and too powerful for words. From age 9 onward, he was never the same again. In 1971, Michael Jackson appeared on Diana Ross's variety show, Diana, a cultural milestone broadcast into homes across America. To the average viewer, it was just another charming performance. But to Michael, it wasn't just stage time. It was something far more personal. He wasn't there with the Jackson 5. He was there because Diana asked for him personally. And beside her, under those studio lights, he wasn't the boy wonder or a budding superstar. He was simply himself, calm, grounded, and unburdened. What few people knew was that during the filming of that show, Michael stayed at Diana's apartment. Not a hotel suite arranged by managers, not a family home. Diana's apartment. There were no paparazzi shots, no scandalous headlines. Just quiet rumors whispered among the crew. Why was this teenage boy, already adored by millions, quietly staying under the same roof as one of the world's most glamorous women? No one accused, but everyone wondered. To Michael, the answer was simple. It felt like home. He later described those days as the first time he could breathe without pressure, the first time he could exist without having to perform. No cameras lurking, no midnight rehearsals, no screaming fans waiting outside. Just soft dinners, old records spinning in the background, shared jokes that only they understood, and silence, the kind of silence that speaks more than words ever could. Diana didn't smother him. She didn't act like a surrogate parent. She just let him be. let him exist in a space that wasn't choreographed, wasn't commercialized. Michael would later say, "She made me feel like I was safe just being Michael," and that meant everything. Because when the rest of the world only saw him as a spectacle, she saw something else. A kid, a human, a soul in need of rest. In that apartment, he wasn't being molded, he was being mended. And while neither of them ever defined what was forming between them, they both felt it. That fragile thread pulling tighter, quietly, and irrevocably. Sometimes, the most profound love stories are the ones never spoken, just shared. In borrowed spaces, shared glances, and long, quiet nights. And for Michael, that apartment became a memory he would carry long after the cameras stopped rolling. In 1978, Michael Jackson accepted a role in the Whiz-An ambitious, all-black adaptation of The Wizard of Oz. For most, it was a bold career move, but for Michael, it wasn't about Broadway dreams or critical acclaim. It was about her, Diana Ross. She played Dorothy. He played the Scarecrow. And for the first time, Michael had more than a reason to show up. He had a reason to stay. This wasn't just a film. This was his chance to be beside the one person who had always made him feel whole. The set became their universe. Day after day, scene after scene, they moved like constellations drawn to each other. Laughter between takes, gentle teasing, private meals in dressing rooms, and most notably, living together in the same apartment Michael rented for the shoot. Headlines, no paparazzi, just quiet murmurs among makeup artists and assistants who sensed what was happening but knew better than to name it. What did they talk about at night? What truths were shared behind closed doors? No one knows, and perhaps that's why it mattered so much, because real intimacy doesn't need proof. It's felt in the way someone shows up day after day, without explanation. In The Wiz, Diana portrayed a woman searching for home. Michael portrayed a character desperate to think for himself. But off-screen, their roles blurred. Diana was Michael's home, and he was trying, day by day, to find his own mind, his own heart. He had just turned 20. Not yet a man, but no longer a boy. He was still figuring out his identity, his voice, and Diana didn't guide him with advice. She guided him by simply being there, constant, steady, real. They performed Ease on Down the Road in Brand New Day, and while the lyrics were joyful, the emotions were unspoken. Their voices harmonized not just musically, but spiritually. By the end of filming, Michael had changed. You could see it in his eyes. A quiet depth, a softness, a peace. They never spoke publicly about that winter, but those few weeks were enough to leave a mark that fame, time, and tragedy could never erase. Because sometimes, the loudest love stories are the ones no one dares to speak aloud. In 1982, Michael Jackson sat down for an interview with Ebony magazine. At the time, he was already a global star, but not yet the king of pop. Thriller hadn't dropped the world, hadn't yet seen the moonwalk. He was still soft-spoken, still vulnerable, and just beginning to find his own voice off stage. The questions were typical at first. Music, fame, creative process. But then, casually, the interviewer asked, "Who's had the biggest impact on your life?" Michael didn't answer right away. He looked down, played with a thread on his sleeve. Then, with a smile that wasn't rehearsed, that wasn't for show, he looked up and said, quietly but clearly, "It's Diana Ross. I love her." Just like that. No hesitation, no explanation. 5 words that shook the air. The room shifted. The interviewer leaned forward, unsure if it was a joke. Michael wasn't smiling anymore. He was serious, completely unguarded. "If I could marry anyone," he added, "it would be her." It wasn't a stunt. It wasn't calculated. It was a confession. One that had lived in him since he was 9 years old. And now, for reasons he probably didn't even fully understand, had finally found its way out. The interview went on. Other topics took over. But nothing hit harder than that. No one expected it. Not his fans, not the press, and certainly not the people who'd spent years speculating about his private life. Most media outlets ignored the quote. A few fans brushed it off as Michael being sweet. Some thought he was playing coy, but he wasn't. Not this time. He had finally said what his heart had whispered for years. And perhaps what's most heartbreaking is that he never said it again. Not in that way. Not with that honesty. No love song, no documentary, just 5 words tucked inside a quiet conversation with a magazine. For the man who built his legend on spectacle, it was this moment of soft, unfiltered truth that revealed the most. It's Diana Ross. I love her, and he meant every syllable. In the mid-1980s, a white envelope arrived at Michael Jackson's home. Elegant, unassuming. Inside was a wedding invitation from Diana Ross. She was marrying Arne Endes Jr., a Norwegian shipping magnate. The press was ecstatic. Fans offered blessings. The tabloids called it a fairy tale. But Michael, he said nothing. He didn't send flowers. He didn't pick up the phone. And when the wedding day came, he wasn't there. His absence wasn't a headline. It wasn't gossip. But those closest to him noticed the change. He became quiet, withdrawn. A light dimmed behind his eyes. This wasn't just another woman getting married. This was her. The one he had openly said he would marry, if the world would just let him. The one he had watched from a distance for years, carrying a love he never dared to act on. And now, she was gone, not to tragedy, but to someone else's arms. One of his closest friends once walked into the studio during that time and found him sitting alone, not working, not singing, just staring at the floor. When asked why he hadn't attended, he responded softly, "I loved her, and I always will. No drama, no bitterness, just heartbreak, quiet, invisible, and raw." The public never knew. He still performed, still appeared at events. But something had shifted, a part of him had gone silent. And in that silence lived the kind of pain only those who have loved without reciprocation can understand. He didn't resent her, he didn't blame her. He loved her enough to let her go. But letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It means loving someone quietly, without expectation. And for Michael, that became the most difficult song he ever had to sing. Diana never addressed his absence publicly. She didn't need to, because some stories don't require dialogue, only memory. That wedding invitation wasn't just an announcement, it was a message. The door had closed, and Michael, always the romantic, always the dreamer, folded that message into his heart and carried it, not because he was weak, but because he knew. Even unreturned love, when it's real, is still worth holding on to. Among Michael Jackson's legendary catalog, 2 songs have stirred more speculation, more whispers, than perhaps any others. Dirty Diana, and Remember the Time. One is fierce, pulsing with anger and defiance. The other is gentle, bathed in memory and longing. And yet, both are haunted by one name, Diana Ross. When Dirty Diana dropped, Michael explained, it was about the dangers of fame, about groupies, women who lingered backstage hoping to capture a piece of his light. But then, someone noticed a detail. The day he copyrighted the song, it was the very same day Diana Ross married R&NDS Jr. Coincidence? Maybe, but Michael wasn't careless. He didn't do things accidentally. Every move, every note, every release had meaning, buried, layered, intentional. Dirty Diana isn't just a song, it's a scream in disguise. It isn't lust, it's loss, wrapped in the bitterness of someone who watched the woman he loved walk away. The chorus is aggressive, but the verses are pleading. Listen closely, and you'll hear the sound of a heart trying not to break in public. Years later came Remember the Time. No anger, no venom, just a question. Do you remember when we fell in love? It doesn't beg for a response, it simply wants to be acknowledged. Like a love letter that doesn't need to be opened, only felt. His brother Jermaine said it plainly. Michael wrote it for Diana. And once you watch the video where Michael plays a man in love with a powerful queen he can never truly touch, it's hard to argue otherwise. She's majestic, distant, above him, a goddess in gold. And yet, his eyes say everything. I once had you, didn't I? Together, these 2 songs become more than music. They're a map of his emotional timeline, one fueled by fire, the other by memory. Michael never confirmed their inspiration. He didn't have to, because the truth lived in his voice, in the way he sang their names, in the tremble of the final note, in the weight of the silence that followed. 2 songs, 2 sides of the same heart, and one woman quietly woven between every line. In the early 1990s, a series of private phone calls between Michael Jackson and a close confidant named Glenda were recorded and years later leaked to the public. These weren't staged interviews, no handlers, no rehearsed answers. Just a man, in the quiet of night, laying down the weight of his heart. And in one of those hushed conversations, he says it. It was one-sided, our relationship. It was just in my head. He didn't cry, he didn't dramatize it. He simply said the truth, with a softness that made it hurt even more. Fans had speculated for years, was his connection to Diana Ross more than just mentorship? Was it admiration? Was it love? Now here was his voice. Fragile, human, confirming that the love he carried for her was never returned in the way he had hoped, and still he didn't let go. He didn't confront her, he didn't ask her for more. Instead, he did what only Michael Jackson would do. He built a shrine, hidden deep within Neverland Ranch, in a part of the estate no tours ever reached. Michael created a room, a quiet sanctuary. No flashing lights, no public access, just a softly lit space filled with photos of Diana, memorabilia, gifts she had once given him, framed memories, sacred silence, not for display. Not for attention, for him. A place to keep a love that never faded. Those who saw it described it as reverent, almost spiritual. It wasn't obsession. One visitor said, it was worship, like a chapel built around a feeling too large to name. To the outside world, it might seem strange, but to Michael, it was peace. A room where he could return to what felt pure. Before the fame, before the pain. He never stopped loving her. He just stopped expecting anything in return. Because for some people, love isn't about possession, it's about preservation. And Michael, ever the believer in fairy tales and forever, preserved his love in the only way he knew how, in silence, in music, and in a hidden room that no one could take from him. A room where love lived quietly, and endlessly. When Michael Jackson's will was unsealed after his death, the world focused on the headlines: his estate, his music catalog, his children's inheritance. But buried in the fine print, quiet and undramatic, was a single name that changed everything for those who truly understood him. If his mother, Katherine Jackson, was unable to care for his children, he named Diana Ross as their legal guardian, not a sibling, not a longtime friend, not a manager or mentor. Diana, the same woman he once described as mother, sister, and lover, all in one. The same woman he never stopped carrying in his heart. This wasn't a PR move. It wasn't symbolic. This was the most personal decision a parent could ever make, entrusting the care of their children to someone else. Not just anyone, the one he trusted above all. To name someone in your will is to say, "This is who I believe in when I'm no longer here." And Michael chose her. No fanfare followed. Diana Ross issued no statement. She didn't speak about it, she didn't have to, because their story had never been about public declarations. It had always lived in glances, gestures, and silences. To those looking closely, this one line in his will was the loudest sentence he ever wrote. Michael didn't name Diana out of nostalgia. He named her because he still saw her as family. As someone who had held a sacred place in his heart since he was 9 years old, he didn't need her to love him back the same way. That wasn't the point. What mattered was trust. This wasn't the kind of love that ends when a chapter closes. This was the kind that lingers, that finds new meaning even in grief. He gave her a role that would only come into effect if the worst happened. That kind of trust is beyond romance. It's legacy. And in that choice, Michael revealed the truth he had never stopped carrying, that she was still the one. Not just then, but always. The will divided his fortune, but it revealed his heart. For decades, Diana Ross remained silent. No interviews, no books, no cryptic remarks. She never spoke publicly about Michael Jackson, not about what they meant to each other, not about what they shared, and not about what they lost. But recently, in the quiet of her later years, she let the silence slip, just once. It wasn't on a stage. It wasn't for the press. It was a damp afternoon, with just a few trusted friends gathered in a room, talking about the past. The conversation drifted to Michael. Someone asked gently, "Did you ever love him?" She didn't answer right away. She stirred her tea, looked out the window. Then, with a voice steady but weighted, she said, "Michael loved me. In a way, that's not easy to name." She looked up. It wasn't a crush. It wasn't passing. It was real. Too real. There was a nervous laugh. Someone thought she was being playful. But she wasn't. "He loved me deeply," she said. "And I knew it. I knew it the whole time. I knew it the whole time." A pause, a breath, then another question. "And did you love him back?" She was silent for a long time. So long that no one thought she'd answer. Then, very quietly, she said, "I cared for him. I cared in a way that frightened me, but to love him as he loved me, I wasn't sure I could. It felt too sacred, too fragile. If I touched it, it might break." She wasn't emotional, she wasn't performing, she was simply telling the truth. And sometimes, that's the most heartbreaking sound of all. She said she kept her distance not to reject him, but to protect him, because she knew how much he felt. She saw it in his eyes, in the way he smiled when he looked at her, in the silences that spoke louder than words. "I didn't want to hurt him," she said, "and I didn't want the world to take what was only ours." And maybe that's why she waited until now. Because some stories aren't meant to be headlines. Some stories are meant to live in memory, where they can't be misunderstood, only remembered.